Hello, everyone. I'm Dwayne Bonifer in the Lindsey Wilson University Office of Public Relations, and this is The View from the Hill, the podcast of Lindsey Wilson University. Every week during the academic year, The View from the Hill features conversations with some of the people who help create the dynamic, living, learning environment that serves the educational needs of every Lindsey Wilson student every day. In this 24th podcast of the 2025-2026 school year, we will discuss art with Carly Flynn. She's the coordinator of Lindsey Wilson's art program. Art classes at Lindsey Wilson have changed a great deal since the legendary Helen Flatt taught them for several decades on the Hill. Carly Flynn is a 2017 Lindsey Wilson alumna who studied art at Lindsey Wilson, and now she teaches the subject to Lindsey Wilson students. She's also coordinator of the university's art program, which is located in the W.W. Slider Humanities Center. During this episode, we're going to discuss the Lindsey Wilson art program, as well as Carly's interest and involvement with art. And Carly, one of your areas of interest in art is digital art. For those who might not be familiar with that medium, what is digital art?
So digital art is just a larger umbrella term that we use to describe any form of art that involves technology. So graphic design is a big one that people think of. Website design also falls into that as well, or just drawing with computer technologies like a iPad or drawing tablet. All of those fall under that greater umbrella of digital art. Animation being another big one that a lot of our students go on to pursue after they graduate. My specialty is more in graphic design and then photo editing, that sort of thing. Graphic design being like marketing, logos, packaging design, apparel design, those sort of things. That's kind of my bread and butter, what I really enjoy working on.
When we opened this podcast, I mentioned the legendary late Helen Flatt, who taught art here for many decades. Digital art wasn't even a thought on people's minds when she retired from Lindsey Wilson College in the 1980s. And I guess the fact that digital art is being studied now as a serious form of art, a serious medium, is a reminder that art is a living thing. It's always evolving, isn't it?
Yes, I would say that art evolves just as much as technology evolves, and even from a larger standpoint, just as much as society evolves. Our needs are always changing. Trends play a big role in that, what type of media people are digesting, right? So digital art plays a huge role in that. I would even venture to say that content creation falls into that as well, and that's a large portion of what we encounter on a daily basis. And most students don't really realize that content, influencers, that all kind of plays into art in some sense.
And I guess, too, that's one of your roles here at Lindsey Wilson is you teach art to students who aren't going to be artists, who are maybe taking the art class because they have to. It's a requirement. So one of the challenges, I imagine, is getting them to understand that art isn't a very myopic area of study. It's very broad.
Yes, especially in the academic sense. A lot of people think of art as you're painting, you're sculpting, and it stays confined in the studio. But as we've already talked about, it's so much more than that. I mean, we encounter art on a daily basis. We make choices that were kind of predetermined for us by artists and designers. We're working with interfaces that people have spent, their life's work on, and it all falls under that larger umbrella of art in some sense. So it's kind of about giving students opportunities to see those things, to kind of unveil what they're already experiencing and showing them that they have the opportunity to be one of those people that get to have a little bit of a say in how we live our everyday life. That's the approach I take with a lot of our lower level classes, like our general education classes. We try to make the course curriculum mirror what we see in the outside world. So we're not just finger painting for fun. We're designing phone cases. We're making presentations about careers in the arts that interest us. So it's all meaningful learning that has an end goal of not just recitation of information, but actual real world application.
How did you become interested in art? Did you fall into art, or did art find you, or was it sort of a mutual attraction?
It was a little bit of both. Honestly, my parents growing up always encouraged me to be creative. I can't remember a time that I didn't have a coloring book or crayons kind of at the ready. I remember even sitting in church as a young kid. When we wouldn't have kids' church, I would be there with a coloring book or even just one of the pens from the pews, marking up the brochure, just doodling. I was always doodling. Where the crossover between art and computers, graphic design came about, I had some wonderful teachers in high school that really got me interested in future business leaders of America. So having to do with business and all those different facets. So I took a lot of computer application classes, and I've always been sort of an analytical person. And up until that point, it had felt very at odds with art. Art was very creative, very free-flowing, just do what you feel, and that never really jived with my personality. I was very type A. So when I got to take those computer applications classes and we were working in programs like Publisher, which is somewhat obsolete now, but it's a great foundational software, and I would make like travel brochures and just fun little flyers, and it kind of clicked for me that art and technology could work together to create endless possibilities. So it wasn't just being stuck in the studio, which I loved the studio, but you only have the limitations of your materials there, your paint, your pastels, what have you. When you're working with technology, you have those same restrictions, but in a different way. And you're reaching, I would argue, a much larger audience because it is so much easier to share an image or share a video versus it's different to see a physical artwork than to experience it through photos. So you're limiting your audience there a little bit. So I've always been interested in the arts, but the world was definitely opened up for me when I figured out that graphic design was a pathway that I could pursue.
You talked about this a little bit earlier, but talk about your approach to how you teach art here at Lindsey Wilson. You imagine it's much different when you're working with a student who's an art major or very interested in art as opposed to somebody who's maybe in a business major who has to take an art class.
Yeah, so I try to approach all of my classes with the meet them where they're at, but don't leave them there type of mindset. Because I have some students who haven't had an art class since kindergarten, and they're going to be in a very different place, like you said, than students who took AP figure drawing. You know, they've got a different set of skills, and just like with any class you teach, every student is bringing their life experiences with them, their preconceived notions and associations. So it's about employing those, what we call modalities of learning. Everybody learns differently. Some people are auditory learners. The podcast is great for them. Some people are tactile learners. They have to get their hands on the materials in order to understand how it works. So I try to employ a project-based learning method, and there's all kinds of studies on this. I'm no expert by any means, but I try to keep the projects, like I had mentioned earlier, a reflection of real-world scenarios or real-world possibilities, and students are working hands-on on certain elements with the end goal of having this deliverable product. So sometimes it might be a collage, and it's not that serious. It's just an expression of feelings and the elements of art. Other times it'll be a t-shirt design for Malvina Farkle Day, and thousands of people get to wear that design, and you're seeing your face everywhere, and you're now, a household name at Lindsey Wilson. So I try to keep things interesting, not just for the sake of interest, but to engage in learning. Because like I mentioned earlier, everyone learns differently, and just lecturing, I've found, doesn't always work. You've got to come at it from different angles, and the responsibility of making a product that you're then going to have to present to others usually motivates students to try a little bit harder or just be a little bit more curious about their learning. That's a big part of it too that a lot of people don't talk about, is being curious about new things, wanting to have that challenge of learning a new skill. A lot of times people are scared to try new things because they're afraid that they'll fail. My classroom, I like to think of it as like a safety net. So we're going to fail, but we've got something there to catch us when we do fail, and we can just get back up and try again.
You're listening to the Lindsey Wilson View from the Hill podcast. I'm Dwayne Bonifer in the Lindsey Wilson Office of Public Relations. I'm talking to Lindsey Wilson alumna, artist, and art faculty member Carly Flynn. To learn more about the art program at Lindsey Wilson, point your internet browser to lindsey.edu and search for art. Now let's get back to my conversation with Carly Flynn. Carly, you've talked a little bit about the art program at Lindsey Wilson, but let's get into it maybe a little more specifically. Art's a major at Lindsey Wilson. What's the program like? What can students expect who major or minor in art at Lindsey Wilson?
So we try to make the major and the minor very cross-disciplinary, and that just means that students have the opportunity to take classes in multiple forms of media. So they'll take beginning drawing, beginning painting, computer graphics, which is a class that I teach, design and color, which is a two-dimensional art class where they use multiple forms of media. The whole idea is to give students exposure to these different kinds of art making so that they can kind of find their niche and figure out what their best work environment is, what their best mode of learning is, and then we kind of work from there. We also want them to just have a foundation in all of the media, because you never know with how things are changing in the workforce. You may be hired for one thing, but then you're expected to do something completely different. It's always evolving and changing, so we want our students to be problem solvers in that way. So we give them a foundation in all these different forms of media. They also take classes in art history. We cover everything from, the beginning of time, right, with cave paintings and Venus of Willendorf, those sort of sculptures, all the way up to more modern art. And students are able to take those classes kind of in different times that work best for their schedule. We're really about meeting the students where they're at, both artistically and educationally, because for so long there's been a big disconnect between art and education. There's been a lot of debate on, should we be doing art for art's sake, or is it about the betterment of ourselves as an artist? And it's a little bit of both with the art program. We try to have graduates that are not only confident in their art making, but they're confident in themselves as human beings. Just in general, but also out in the workforce. We live in a world where, you have to make rent, you have to put food on the table. So we can't just live in the camp of art for art's sake when it comes to our careers, our making a living. So we want to prepare students for that as best we can. And that's kind of baked into the course curriculum as much as we can. Our seminar classes are a great example of that. Our faculty make valiant efforts to prepare students for the process of submitting work, what rejection looks like, what kind of edits maybe need to be made, how to apply for grants, things like that. It's all about preparing for that postgraduate life. Again, that safety net that we talked about, trying new things and having the luxury of being able to fail in a safe environment.
And it sounds like that there are opportunities in the workforce for someone who majors in art. You don't necessarily have to become a starving artist.
Yes, the starving artist is no more, and that'll be my final take on that. But there's so many opportunities out there. Like I mentioned earlier with social media, influencers, there are people across the globe making money on social media while doing their art. So they're doing what they love, painting, maybe they're video editing, whatever it may be, but they're making their money, making their living from the content side of it, kind of marketing that, finding their audience that's going to, either click a link to buy a product or just subscribe and keep giving the likes and the comments and whatnot. So it's about the marketability of it. And I would love to sit here and say that every student at Lindsey Wilson is here because they love to learn, but they're here to get that degree, right? That piece of paper that says, I'm a hard worker, I've been through all of these classes, these are the skills that I have, employ me, right? And an art degree is a lot more versatile than what the general public would have you think. I mean, you can work as a museum curator. You can be an elementary art teacher. You can be a graphic designer for a large corporation. There's so many different options out there that students, I think, just haven't been able to consider because the media doesn't take the time to kind of explain these things, right? We all love watching television and film, but we don't have a lot of behind the scenes looking at producers, camera people, those that work in, sound design, right? These are all careers that people have to do, but does the general public know what goes into applying for those type of positions, working in those type of positions, being competitive in that field, right? It's all about the education around the employability of a degree. And I would argue that any program does that as well. It's just sometimes art has to work a little bit harder to make itself seem professional or marketable.
What do you enjoy most about teaching art?
I love the moment where students are proud of themselves for, either finishing a piece or just that aha moment of, oh my goodness, I can do this with this particular media. Like today, we were working in class on a piece, and a couple students tried pastels for the first time, oil pastels. And they were kind of experimenting with them on the page, doing different methods to blend them. And then I just kind of saw the realization of, oh, I can use this to do this, and it will have this desired effect. And seeing them connect the dots is my favorite thing, honestly. And it goes across classes, whether I'm in the studio or in the Mac lab working with students. That aha moment is just very satisfying, and I never get tired of it.
That's Lindsey Wilson artist and art faculty member Carly Flynn. And that's going to do it for this 24th edition of The View from the Hill for the 2025-2026 school year. You can tell us what you like or don't like about this podcast by firing off an email, and you can send that to news@lindsey.edu. Be sure to put podcast in the subject line. Also, be sure to encourage your friends, co-workers, family members, associates, and neighbors to subscribe to A View from the Hill. They can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and on the university's YouTube channel. View from the Hill is produced by Shelby Burton. She's Lindsey Wilson's Assistant Director of Public Relations and Media Producer. And until our next edition, I'm Dwayne Bonifer in the Lindsey Wilson University Office of Public Relations. Thanks so much for listening. So long, everybody, and have a nice day.